Krishna Vastaya Uttame Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasarine Nirvasesha Sunyavati Ashakare Sakarine Namaste Sarvate Deve Gauravani Prasarine Nirvasesha Sunyavati Ashakare Sakarine Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Bala Lava Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Bala Lava Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Bala Lava Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Prajajanarandana Prajajanarandana Yasodanandana Prajajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Givaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Givaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Go Premanande. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shishi Gornitai ki jai. Shri Radha Govinda Madhava ki jai, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai, Harinama Sankirtana ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Krishna. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivajakacharya Satar Sati Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpaturubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Panam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastachade Shatarne. Hare Krishna, welcome Prabhus this evening for a wonderful opportunity to dive deeper into a relationship with Krishna. And it so happens that today is, besides being the last day of the World ISKCON World Shravanam week, we're hearing about Krishna, hearing from scriptures today. Today happens to be the anniversary, it's the 54th anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja in New York, and the 54th anniversary is of his first giving his first initiation in the Western world. So I thought tonight, as a change, we're going to do some reading and talking also, maybe something in between. But we're going to be reading from the Prabhupada Leelamrita. And this is going back now to 1966 in New York. It's the very early stage and the very first initiation in ISKCON, given by Srila Prabhupada on this date, September the 9th, 1966, in 26 2nd Avenue. And I don't expect any of us were there, at least not in this body. But Srila Prabhupada was there, unknown to the world outside of 26 2nd Avenue. Srila Prabhupada was there. It was his Vyasa Puja ceremony, and he gave first initiation. So let's read about it and then see what Krishna read. Om Ajnana Timurandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Caitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Shvayam Bhutadamayam Dadati Shvapadantika. And we're going to go back one day, partially, to the day before Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja Day is Janmastami. So by the arrangement of Krishna, the next day is pure devotee appeared in this world after Janmastami to give us the direction to go, how we can really celebrate Janmastami. So this is Janmastami Day now. Let's see, maybe it's the day before Janmastami, but it's around about that time. Keith, Keith, the later on became Kirtanananda. Keith was cooking lunch in the kitchen as usual. But today, Swamiji was standing by the kitchen stove, watching his pupil. Keith paused and looked up from his cooking. And Keith said, Swamiji, could I become your disciple? Yes, Prabhupada replied. Why not? Your name will be Krishnadas. Of course, we're all Krishnadas. In one sense, Prabhupada said that to everyone, even if that wasn't the final name. But he had Krishnadas, we're all servants of Krishna. Just like he said with the cows. He said, what should we call the cows, Srila Prabhupada in the farm? Prabhupada said, you should call her Sarabi. But many cows. Yes, Sarabi. Sarabi 1, Sarabi 2, Sarabi 3, Sarabi 4. So said that. The simple exchange was the first request for discipleship and Prabhupada's first granting of initiation. But there was more to it than that. Prabhupada announced that he would soon hold an initiation. What's initiation, Swamiji? One of the boys asked. And Prabhupada replied, I will tell you later. First, they had to shave their heads. Keith went to Tandy's leather company and bought 1/2-inch wooden beads and cord to string them on. It was much better, Swamiji said, to count on beads while chanting. a strand of 108 beads to be exact. This employed the sense of touch, and like the Vaishnavas of India, one could count how many times one chanted the mantra. Some devotees in India had a string of more than 1,000 beads, he had said, and they would chant through them again and again. He taught the boys how to tie a double knot between each of the 108 beads. The number 108 has a special significance. There were 108 Upanishads, as well as 108 principal gopis, the chief devotees of Lord Krishna. The initiates would be taking vows, he said, and one vow was be to chant a prescribed number of rounds on the beads each day. About a dozen of Swamiji's boys were eligible, but there was no strict system for their selection. If they wanted to, they could do it. Steve later on became Satswarup. Steve, although I was already doing whatever Swamiji recommended, I sensed that initiation was a heavy commitment. And with my last strong impulses to remain completely independent, I hesitated to take initiation. Prabhupada's friends saw the initiation in different ways. Some saw it as very serious. Some took it to be like a party or a happening. While stringing their beads in the courtyard, Wally and Howard talked a few days before the ceremony. Wally, he later on became Umapati, and Howard became Hayagriva. Wally, it's just a formality. You accept Swamiji as your spiritual master. Howard, what does that entail? Wally, well, nobody's very sure about that. In India, it's a standard practice. Yeah? Don't you think you want to take him as a spiritual master? Howard, I don't know. He would seem to be a good spiritual master, whatever that is. I like him and his teachings a lot, but so I guess in a way, he's already my spiritual master. I just don't understand how it would change the situation. Wally, neither do I. I guess it doesn't really. It's just a formality. So that's what they were talking. September the 8th, Janmastami. Janmastami Day, 1966. The appearance day of Lord Krishna. 1 year before, Prabhupada had observed Krishna's birthday at sea aboard the Jaladuta, just out of Colombo. Now, exactly 1 year later, he had a small crew of Hare Krishna chanters. He would gather them all together, have them observe a day of chanting, reading scripture, fasting, and feasting. And the next day would be initiation. At 6 o'clock, Prabhupada came down and was about to give his morning class as usual, when one of the boys asked if he would read from his own manuscript. Prabhupada appeared shy, yet he did not hide his pleasure at having been asked to read his own Bhagavad Gita commentary. Usually he would read a verse from Dr. Radhakrishna's Oxford edition of the Gita. Although the commentary presented impersonalist philosophy, the translations Prabhupada said were 90% accurate. But this morning he sent Roy. Roy later on became Rai Ram. He sent Roy up to fetch his manuscript, and for an hour he read from its typewritten pages. For observing Janmastami, there were special rules. There should be no eating, and the day was to be spent chanting, reading, and discussing Krishna consciousness. If anyone became too weak, he said, there was fruit in the kitchen. But better that they fast until feast at midnight, just like the devotees in India. He said that in India, millions of people, Hindus, even Muslims or whatever, observe the birthday of Lord Krishna. And in every temple, there were festivities and celebrations of the pastimes of Krishna. And now, he said at length, I will tell you what is meant by initiation. The Prabhupada begins to tell the devotees gathered there what initiation means. Initiation means that the spiritual master accepts the student and agrees to take charge, and the student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. He paused. No one spoke. Any questions? And there were none. He got up and walked out. The devotees were stunned. What had they just heard him say? For weeks he had stressed that when anyone claims to be God, he should be considered a dog. Oh, Wally said, my mind's just been blown. Everybody's mind's blown, said Howard. Swamiji just dropped a bomb. If you know what that means, American language, they're completely shocked, bewildered, confused, etc. His Prabhupada just said something which is completely blew apart everything he said before. So they thought. They thought of Keith. He was wise. Consult Keith. But Keith was in the hospital. Actually, Keith's family had him more or less kidnapped and put in the mental hospital. They thought he'd gone mad. So they thought, let's consult Keith. Talking among themselves, they became more and more confused. Swamiji's remark had confounded their judgment. Finally, Wally decided to go to the hospital to see Keith. Keith listened to the whole story, how Swamiji had told them to fast, and how he had read from his manuscript, how he had said he would explain initiation, and how everybody had leaned forward, all ears, and Swamiji had dropped a bomb. The student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. Any questions? Swamiji had asked softly. Any questions? And then he had walked out. I don't know if I want to be initiated now, Wally confessed. We have to worship him as God? Well, Keith said, you're already doing that by accepting whatever he tells you. And he advised that they talk it over with the Swamiji before the initiation. So Wally went back to the temple and consulted Howard, and together they went up to Swamiji's apartment. Howard asked, does what you told us this morning mean we are supposed to accept the spiritual master to be God? Prabhupada replied calmly, that means he is due the same respect as God, being God's representative. Then he is not God? No, Prabhupada said. God is God. The spiritual master is his representative. Therefore, he is as good as God, because he can deliver God to the sincere disciple. Is that clear? It was. Big relief. It was a mental and physical strain to go all day without eating. Jan was restless. She complained that she couldn't possibly stay any longer, but had to take care of her cat. Prabhupada tried to overrule her, but she left anyway. Most of the prospective initiates spent several hours that day stringing their shiny red wooden beads. Having tied one end of the string to a window bar or a radiator, they would slide one bead at a time up the string and knot it tightly, chanting one mantra of Hare Krishna for each bead. It was devotional service, chanting and stringing your beads for initiation. Every time they knotted another bead, it seemed like a momentous event. These are first beads in ISKCON. Prabhupada said that devotees in India chanted at least 64 rounds on beads a day. Saying the Hare Krishna mantra once on each of the 108 beads constituted one round. His spiritual master said that anyone who didn't chant 64 rounds a day was fallen. At first, some of the boys thought that they would have also to chant 64 rounds, and they became perplexed. That would take all day. How could you go to a job if you had to chant 64 rounds? How could anyone chant 64 rounds? And someone said Swamiji had told him that 32 rounds a day would be sufficient minimum for the West. Wally said he had heard Swamiji say 25, but even that seemed impossible. Then Prabhupada offered the rock bottom minimum. It's rock bottom. You can't go any lower. It's rock, bottom of the water. 16 rounds a day without fail. Whoever got initiated would have to promise. Ooh. The bead stringing, chanting, reading, and dozing went on until 11 at night, when everyone was invited up to Swamiji's room. As they filed through the courtyard, they sensed an unusual calm in the atmosphere, and Houston Street, just over the wall, was quiet. There was no moon. They say Houston Street in New York, Houston Street. As his followers sat on the floor, contentedly eating prasadam from paper plates, Swamiji sat among them, telling stories about the birth of Lord Krishna. Krishna had appeared on this evening 5,000 years ago. He was born the son of Vasudeva and Devaki in the prison of King Kamsa at midnight. And his father, Vasudeva, immediately took him to Vrindavan, where he was raised as the son of Nanda Maharaj, a cowherd man. Prabhupada also spoke of the necessity of purification for spiritual advancement. It is not enough merely to chant holy words, he said. One must be pure inside and out. Chanting in purity brings spiritual advancement. The living entity becomes impure because he wants to enjoy material pleasure. But the impure can become pure by following Krishna, by doing all works for Krishna. Beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time. But to advance spiritually, you must resist their temptation and continuously increase your efforts and devotion. Michael Grant later on became Mukunda Goswami. Michael Grant. I first heard about the initiation just one day before it was to take place. I'd been busy with my music and hadn't been attending. I was walking down 2nd Avenue with one of the prospective initiates, and he mentioned to me there was going to be something called an initiation ceremony. I asked what it was about, and he said, all I know is it means that you accept the spiritual master as God. This was a big surprise to me, and I hardly knew how to take it, but I didn't take it completely seriously, and the way it was mentioned to me in such an offhand way made it seem not very important. He asked me very casually whether I was going to be involved. I also, being very casual about it, said, well, I think I will. Why not? I'll give it a try. Imagine that for initiation. I'll think about it. Yeah, why not? I'll give it a try. Bit different to what we've seen in recent times. Jan didn't think she would make an obedient disciple, and initiation sounded frightening to her. She liked the Swami, especially cooking with him, but it was Mike who convinced her. He was going, okay, so she would come along with him. They were together at the time. They weren't married, but they were boyfriend and girlfriend. Carl Jurgens knew something about initiation from his readings, and he, more than the others, knew what a serious commitment it was. He was surprised to hear that Swamiji was offering initiation. He was cautious about entering into it. He knew that an initiation meant no illicit sex, no intoxication or meat eating, and an initiated disciple would have new responsibilities for spreading the teachings to others. Carl was already feeling less involved since the Swami had moved to 2nd Avenue, but he decided to attend the initiation anyway. Because actually before moving to 2nd Avenue, Prabhupada had been staying with Carl Jurgens in his apartment. Carl had been very much into Eastern philosophy and yoga and stuff, but his wife wasn't very into it, with whatever partner. Wasn't into Prabhupada much at all. They had cats and they were meat in the fridge and this and that. But Prabhupada stayed with him for some days before he moved to Second Avenue, in between the Bowery. When he was in the Bowery, he stayed a few days in Carl Jurgen's place, and then he moved to Second Avenue in, I think it was June. They moved in the beginning of June. That place in Second Avenue was found by Mukunda. Michael Grant found it, and then they all helped Ramaji to move in. Excuse me. Bill Epstein had never professed to be a serious disciple. Holding initiation was just another part of the Swami's scene, and you were free to take it seriously or not. He figured it was all right to take initiation, even if you weren't serious. Anyway, give it a go. I'll try it. Now, Bill Epstein and what's the other one? I've forgotten his name offhand, but another guy, they had been the main ones to assist Prabhupada when he moved from uptown New York down to the Bowery. And they were very frequenting a place called the Paradox, which was like a kind of like a drop-in center for young hippies and things. And they were very influential there, and they were bringing people. They helped find this place in the Bowery for Prabhupada, and they were bringing people there. They were very instrumental in the early days, although not so serious about practicing themselves. But anyway, they were very instrumental like that. And so he was one of them who thought, I'll give it a try. Carol Becker was surprised to hear that some people would be taking initiation, even though they had no intentions of giving up their bad habits. She'd stopped coming around regularly ever since the Swami had moved. Carol was the partner of Carl Jurgens, and she felt no desire to take for asking for initiation. Swamiji probably wouldn't initiate women anyway, she figured. Robert Nelson hadn't forgotten the Swami and always liked to help whenever he could. But except for an occasional friendly visit, he had stopped coming. He mostly stayed to himself. He still lived uptown and wasn't into the Lower East Side scene. James Green thought he wasn't pure enough to be initiated. Who am I to be initiated, he said. But the Swami had asked him to bring something over to the storefront. I came, and it was kind of just understand that I was supposed to be initiated. So I thought, okay, why not? You can see they were all very prepared for initiation. Stanley had been chanting regularly again and had come out of his crazy mood. He was sticking with the Swami and his followers. He asked his mother if he could be initiated, and she said it would be all right. Steve wanted more time to think about it. Keith was in the hospital. Bruce had only just begun attending for a week or two, and it was too soon. Bruce became Brahmananda very shortly after this. Chuck, who became a Chutananda, was on a week's vacation from his regulated spiritual life at the temple, so he didn't know about the initiation. Okay, now we go on. No one was asked to shave his head or even cut his hair or change his dress. No one offered Prabhupada the traditional Guru Dakshina, the donation the disciple is supposed to offer as a gesture of his great obligation to his master. Hardly anyone even relieved Prabhupada of his chores. So Swamiji himself had to do most of the cooking and other preparations for the initiation. He was perfectly aware of the mentality of his boys, and he did not try to force anything on anyone. Some of the initiates did not know until after the initiation, when they had inquired, that the 4 rules, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, were mandatory for all disciples. They didn't even know. Prabhupada's reply then was, I am very glad that you are finally asking me that. They'd already gone through it. It was to be a live Vedic sacrifice with a ceremonial fire right there in the front room of Swamiji's apartment. And his room was so small. It was probably smaller than any of your bedrooms. In the center of the room was a sacrificial arena, a platform of bricks 4 inches high and 2 feet square, covered with a mound of dirt. The dirt was from the courtyard and the bricks were from a nearby gutted building. Around the mound were 11 bananas, clarified butter, sesame seeds, whole barley grains, 5 colors of powdered dyes, and a supply of kindling wood. The 11 initiates took up most of the remaining space in the front room as they sat on the floor, knee to knee, around the sacrificial arena. The guests in the hallway peered curiously through the open door. For everyone except the Swami, this was all new and strange, and every step of the ceremony took place under his direction. When some of the boys had made a mess of trying to apply the Vaishnav tilak to their foreheads, Prabhupada patiently guided his finger up their foreheads, making a neat, narrow V. He sat before the mound of earth, looking out at his congregation. They appeared not much different from any other group of young hippies from the Lower East Side, who might have assembled at any of the happenings going on, spiritual, cultural, musical, or whatever. Some were just checking out a new scene. Some were deeply devoted to the Swami, but everyone was curious. He had requested them to chant the Hare Krishna mantra softly throughout the ceremony, and the chanting had now become a continual drone, accompanying his mysterious movements as head priest of the Vedic rite. He began by lighting a dozen sticks of incense. Then he performed purification with water. Taking a spoon in his left hand, he put 3 drops of water from a goblet into his right and sipped the water. He repeated the procedure 3 times. The 4th time he did not sip, but flicked the water on the floor behind him. He then passed the spoon and goblet around for the initiates who tried to copy what they had just seen. When some of them placed the water in the wrong hand or sipped in the wrong way, Swamiji patiently corrected them. Now he said, repeat after me, and he had them repeat, 1 word at a time, a Vedic mantra of purification. Om Pavitra Pavitro Va Sarvavastang Gotopi Va Yakshmaret Pundirikaksham Sabhayabhyantarakshuchihi. Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu. The initiates tried falteringly to follow his pronunciation of the words, which they had never heard before. Then he gave the translation. Unpurified or purified, or even having passed through all situations, one who remembers the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead is cleansed within and without. 3 times he repeated the sipping of water, the drone of the Hare Krishna mantra filling the room as the goblet passed from initiate to initiate and back again to him. And 3 times he led the chanting of the mantra, Om Apitra Pavitro Va. Then he raised a hand as a buzzing of the chanting trailed off into silence. He began his lecture. After the lecture, he asked the devotees one by one to hand him their beads, and he began chanting on them. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Prabhupada chanted right there in the room, one by. This must have been a long yajna, pretty long by the sounds of it. I mean, chanting on 11 beads can take quite a while. Chant 1 round on each bead. After finishing one strand, he would summon the owner of the beads and hold the beads up while demonstrating how to chant, because no one had chanted on beads before. Then he would announce the initiate's spiritual name, and the disciple would take back the beads, bow to the floor, and recite Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. There were 11 initiates, and so 11 sets of beads, and the chanting lasted for over an hour. Prabhupada gave each boy a strand of neck beads, which he said were like dog collars, identifying the devotee as Krishna's dog. After Wali received his beads and his new name, Umapati, he returned to his place beside Howard and said, "Oh, that was wonderful. My getting your beads is wonderful." In turn, each initiate received his beads and his spiritual name. Howard became Hayagriva, Wali became Umapati, Bill became Ravindra Swarup, That's not the Ravindra Swarup, who is presently senior devotee in ISKCON, very wonderful a preacher, Krishna conscious. Another one, this earlier Ravindra Swarup, he didn't stay around too long. Karl became Karlapati, James became Jagannath, Mike became Mukunda, Jan became Janaki, Roy became Roy Ram, and Stanley became Strayadish. Another Stanley, a Brooklyn boy with a job, and Janos, a college student from Montreal, both of whom had rather peripheral relations with the Swami, appeared that night and took initiation with the rest, receiving the names Satyavrata and Janardan. Janardan was very instrumental in starting the Canadian chapter of ISKCON. He was French-Canadian. Then Swamiji began the fire sacrifice by sprinkling the colored dyes across the mound of earth before him. With fixed attention, his congregation watched each mysterious move as he picked up the twigs and wooden splinters, dipped them into clarified butter, lit them in a candle flame, and built a small fire in the center of the mound. He mixed sesame seeds, barley, and clarified butter in a bowl and then passed the mixture around. Each new disciple took a handful of the mixture to offer into the fire. He then began to recite Sanskrit prayers, asking everyone please to repeat them, each prayer ending with a responsive chanting of the word Svaha 3 times, and with Svaha, the initiates would toss some of the sesame barley mixture into the fire. Swamiji kept pouring butter, piling up wood, and chanting more prayers until the mound was blazing. The prayers kept coming, and the butter kept pouring, and the fire got larger, and the room got hotter. It wasn't a very big room. After 15 or 20 minutes, he asked each of the initiates to place a banana in the fire. With 11 bananas heaped on the fire, the flames began to die, and the smoke thickened. A few of the initiates got up and ran coughing into the other room, and the guests retreated into the hallway. But Swamiji went on pouring the remaining butter and seeds into the fire. This kind of smoke does not disturb, he said. Other smoke disturbs, but this kind of smoke does not. Even though everyone's eyes were watering with irritation, he asked that the windows remain closed, so most of the smoke was contained within the apartment, and no neighbors complained. Swamiji smiled boldly, rose from his seat before the sacrificial fire, the blazing tongue of Vishnu, and began clapping his hands and chanting Hare Krishna, placing one foot before the other and swaying from side to side. He began to dance before the fire. His disciples joined him in dancing and chanting, and the smoke abated. He had each disciple touch his beads to the feet of Lord Caitanya in the Panchatattva picture on the table, and finally he allowed the windows opened. As the ceremony was finished and the air in the apartment was clearing, Swamiji began to laugh. There was so much smoke, I thought they might have to call the fire brigade, he said. Prabhupada was happy. He arranged the prasadam be distributed to all the devotees and guests. The fire, the prayers, the vows, everyone chanting Hare Krishna had all created an auspicious atmosphere. Things were going forward. Now there were initiated devotees in the Western world. Finally, most of the disciples went home to their apartments, leaving their spiritual master to clean up after the initiation ceremony. Jai Shri Prabhupada. So that was a little account of their first initiation in New York. A few days after, there was a first marriage ceremony, wedding ceremony, and then shortly after that, on Vadastami, was another initiation, Satsvarup marriage. I don't know, or quite a few others, maybe Kirtananda, quite a few others took initiation in Vadastami. There were a few initiations, Ramananda and his brother Gargamuni and Chutananda. Many of them took initiation within a few weeks of each other there in New York. But when Prabhupada went to San Francisco very at the beginning of '67, a few months later, and after some months, of course, some young people were also coming forward there. And Prabhupada also held an initiation ceremony there at some point of time. in the early part of 67. And devotees like Shyamasundar and Jamuna, Gurudas, and like that, and Malati, and other devotees like that took initiation. In fact, that one person who became Haridas, what was his name now? Harvey Cohen. He was the other one who helped Bill Epstein to establish Prabhupada in the Lower East Side. Harvey Cohen had gone to the West Coast to sort of prepare things with the idea that maybe Swamiji can also come there and preach. So he did, then he called Mukunda over, and Mukunda went over. They started a little branch there in San Francisco, and then of course Shamsundar and Gurudas joined up with them. Like that, they grew. So that initiation, Harvey Cohen became Haridas. Prabhupada already had a Haridas. Prabhupada's first disciple in India, we usually know him as what's his name? Forgotten anyway, whatever his name was, but the actual name Prabhupada gave him was Haridas. Usually we don't hear him by that name, but Prabhupada in one letter he said actually his name's Haridas. So Prabhupada then had two Haridases over a period of 10, 12 years. So that was then. And when they had the first initiation, the devotees were really even less so than in New York, practically speaking, familiar with what the procedures were. And when Prabhupada, the bananas were there for them to put in the fire, then Prabhupada said, then, now take the banana. Prabhupada would say like that, now take the banana. It means hold the banana. But they thought it meant now take it. They thought it meant eat the banana. So they picked up the bananas and they started peeling them, just about to eat them. And Prabhupada, no. He stopped them. They said, not for eating, this is for putting in the fire. But they thought, now take. If you say to someone, please take a sweet, that means eat it, right? In the Western world. So they thought to eat it. Then after that was gone, and now Prabhupada said, now bow down. But he said it in such a strong accent. They thought he said, now blow down. They all started blowing on the fire like this. And all the smoke went into Prabhupada's face. They didn't know what was going on. They had no idea what was happening. It was like they were long hair and jeans and T-shirts and or I doubt whether anyone had even taken a bath. They knew nothing. It was like when Prabhupada installed is the word for it, Jagannath there in San Francisco. It was such a simple ceremony. Literally everyone was there, but nobody had dhotis or shaved heads. They were just there with their jeans and whatever else they had on, hippie clothes, some of them. And they said, no, the initiation is chanting Hare Krishna and like this with a candle in front of Jagannath. And that was the initiation ceremony of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And one devotee said to Prabhupada, Swamiji, is there anything else in regards to this? Prabhupada said, oh yes, there are so many other things. If I tell you what they are, you will faint. It's just like, so he just gave bare simplicity. Now there's a big lesson to learn here, obviously, for those born in Indian families or whatever it is. You have a lot of knowledge of these things or experience maybe. But in the Western world, nobody had any knowledge, experience, and knowing nothing about these things. But aside from that, when we preach Krishna consciousness, we have to bear in mind that when people come to Krishna consciousness, they're in the same, maybe they're not hippies, but they're in the same kind of state of unawareness as any of these young boys and girls that came to Prabhupada in the early days in New York or in San Francisco. So to kind of dive bomb them into a very kind of rigid system of rules and regulations and this thing and that thing is a pretty heavy thing at the first, when you first encounter Krishna consciousness. So there's a very important, need of accessible venues for people to connect with Krishna consciousness, wherever they may be. It may not be exactly the same style according to time, place, and circumstance, but accessibility is really important for people, how they can connect with Krishna. I'm not going to follow all these rules. Even many of the young boys and girls who took initiation, they didn't even know about the rules. And they say, oh God, I'm not going to do that. Follow those rules? No way. I don't mind chanting Hare Krishna and coming and eating prasadam, but that's enough. So the same thing applies even now. It's not like people are more advanced or something. They come with all kinds of attachments and material desires, bad habits, or whatever we wish to call it. And it's not expected that they're going to immediately, they're not looking for a place to give these things up. They're looking for a place to get happiness maybe, but not give these things up. So the miracle of Prabhupada's movement is that millions of people did give up these activities, but maybe not immediately. That's very rare that someone does that. So accessible places where people can feel comfortable to connect to Krishna consciousness, and necessary in the basic spreading of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, people come and it's kind of like they see something, whatever it is. To them, it's very high standard, all the standards we have in temples, even in preaching centers, sometimes it's very, very high. And that's nice. But we've got to bear in mind the people who are coming, and is this going to help them to become attracted to Krishna or not? Is this going to help them to connect to Krishna or not? So Prabhupada was like that. I mean, he did, when that famous poet Allen Ginsberg, Prabhupada called Ginsberg, he would come regularly in 66 to see Srila Prabhupada, and he was helping him, no doubt about that. But he says, Swamiji, you're very conservative. You're very conservative, Swamiji. And Prabhupada said, conservative? Am I not conservative? Goodness, if my godbrothers saw me doing this, they would have a heart attack. They couldn't believe what I'm doing here in New York. And you could say, in one sense, not compromising behavior, but compromising the method of presenting Krishna consciousness to become accessible or digestible to the Western hippies at that time. They couldn't believe it. And Prabhupada was staying in apartments, the first place in Butler where he stayed. The hosts there, they were not vegetarian. Mr. Gopal Agarwal, the man who owned the house, the husband there, he was smoking. Sally Agarwal, his wife, was a very nice lady, but she was also not following. But Prabhupada said, think nothing of it. It's fine, think nothing of it. He just didn't even bother trying to, they were his hosts. He took it very kindly, their kind offer. He was very kind to them. I think nothing. He used to cook for them. And similarly, when he went to New York, he used to cook for Dr. Mishra in his yoga studio. And in the bar, he would also cook and do everything there. And now in Second Avenue, he was doing, even though the boys, those who took initiation, may or may not have been following strictly, but Prabhupada had to get as we say in English, had to get the ball moving, the wheels rolling, whatever. He had to get the thing on the road. Huh? So he had to try something at least to get moving. We don't imitate Prabhupada now. The principle of preaching may have a similar take, but not necessarily the details when it comes to initiation and so on. Obviously, some caution is there, some preparation is there, some more knowledge is there, understanding what it means, etc. And commitment. Everything is more clear now. But Prabhupada had to get things moving in New York and San Francisco because there was nothing. So through many of these young boys and girls who took initiations, all in their late teens or early 20s in those days, many of them became major instruments in spreading Krishna consciousness, like Kunda and Kirtananda and Satsvarup, Brahmananda and Gakamuni and Chitananda and Chaturani and so many. They all did, right? Ram in the beginning was very instrumental, very powerful. Later on, Hayagriva and Mahapati also tremendous preachers of Krishna consciousness. So that's just a little bit about the first initiation. And this is what, don't forget, from the 17th of September to the 23rd of September is World Holy Name Week. We don't call it week anymore, we call it festival. The World Holy Name Festival, 17th to the 23rd of September. So please make a note of that. 17th of September, very significant date, is the date that Prabhupada arrived in Boston. So that whole week is supposed to be encouraging the devotees in ISKCON to increase their chanting and hearing during that period of time. Now I'm going to read something from Prabhupada's books. This is a beautiful section. You may or may not have heard it or read it, but this is in the Caitanya Charitamrta. And this is a section where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving teachings to Sanatana Goswami. The two brothers, Sanatana was older, his younger brother Rupa Goswami, first met Lord Chaitanya in terms of getting teachings. They both met in Ramkeli, where they were actually serving in the Mohammedan Muslim government on Lord Chaitanya's one of his endeavors to go to Vrindavan. They both met him there. And Lord Chaitanya had given them guidelines to what to do with the rest of their lives, to go to Vrindavan and write books and uncover the places of Krishna's pastimes establish the principle of deity worship, etc., and teach the tenets of practical devotion and service, not just the philosophy, but the practice of devotion and service. So they had these four basic directions from Lord Caitanya, but they were very busy in the government of Nalapa, Saint Shah, so they couldn't all lead. And there was another brother named Anupam, who was younger brother, but he was also there in that government. So they decided that Rupa and Anupam would leave, and Sanatana would stay to manage affairs. And so Rupa left Ramkeli, and when he heard Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was again going to Vrindavan, this time Lord Chaitanya didn't go through Bengal, he went through the Jharkhand district and reached Vrindavan. And Rupa Goswami then, on knowledge of the Lord's going to Vrindavan, also retired from his governmental post and left to join Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They were quite young at that time, maybe in their 20s. They were quite young men. And Rupa Goswami left, and he went, and Lord Chaitanya spent a month in Vrindavan, then his plan was, for various reasons, to return back to Jagannath Puri. So as he was returning back in Allahabad, Prayag, Triveni, whatever you know it by, Lord Chaitanya reached Allahabad, and it so happened Rupa Goswami arrived there at the same time. So Rupa Goswami had the opportunity to meet Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu there in Allahabad on the river Ganga Jamuna, on the river Join there. And Lord Chaitanya then instructed Rupa Goswami on the science of devotional service. And then Rupa Goswami put that into the form of nectar of devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And Lord Chaitanya then continued on his journey back to Jagannath Puri, and he came to Varanasi, Benares, on the banks of the river Ganga also. And there, by now Sanatana Goswami had also escaped. He was put under house arrest when he tried to avoid his service to the king, but he escaped. And Sanatana Goswami had also arrived at that place, Varanasi. Lord Chaitanya was staying in the house of Chandrasekhar Acharya and taking his meals in the house of Tapan Mishra. And there at the house of Chandrasekhar, Sanatana Goswami found that Lord Chaitanya was staying, so he went there. And Sanatana was dressed like a Muslim. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told his servant, told Chandrasekhar, I think there's a sadhu outside, a very saintly Vaishnava outside. Can you please invite him in? So Chandrasekhar went outside and didn't see any saintly Vaishnava. He saw his mendicant. He thought he was a Muslim mendicant. And he came back and said, no, there's no Vaishnava out there, my lord. He said, look, who is there? And he said, there's this Muslim man there who looks like a Muslim mendicant. He said, bring him in. So then Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami embraced each other. They embraced. Lord Chaitanya was in ecstasy to meet his eternal associate again. And of course he had Chandrasekhar clean him up, take him down to the Ganga, shave up, and put on a Vaishnava attire. But as they met, and then Lord Chaitanya, for 2 months there in Varanasi, Dasha Shrameda, Lord Chaitanya then instructed Sanatana Goswami, also like Rupa Goswami, even more extensively. He instructed in the science of devotional service. And for many months he was there instructing Sanatana. He also delivered the Mayavadis, Shashananda Saraswati and the Mayavadis were numerous there in Varanasi. Lord Chaitanya delivered them all out of his humility, sheer humility. So now I'm going to read a little section of what Lord Chaitanya taught to Sanatana Goswami from the Caitanya Charitamrta. It's a beautiful section which deals with the importance of association. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. If you want to follow, or you can follow, like I'm saying, this is all last minute stuff basically. This is in the Caitanya Charitamrta, Madhya Lila, chapter 22. And we're reading from text 45 onwards. Now, if Rasikananda has access to that and has the time and means to do it, you could scroll and find and put this on the screen. So I'm going to start from text 45 And we'll be reading, I don't know, maybe quite a few verses, I don't know how many, maybe 15 or something, I don't know. Some verses. Kono bhagi karo samsara chayon mukha kahaya sadhu sangitabe Krishna rati upajaya. By good fortune, one becomes eligible to cross the ocean of nescience. And when one's term of material existence decreases, one may get an opportunity to associate with pure devotees. By such association, one's attraction to Krishna is awakened. So in this verse, good fortune, what is that good fortune? Well, it's Krishna's mercy, no doubt. But Krishna's mercy, in literal terms, means we get the opportunity to meet a devotee. This is good fortune. We may not think like that, but it is. Somehow or other, we had that opportunity to meet with a devotee. And by the association of that devotee, one is able to cross the ocean of nescience, or ignorance, material existence, by their association. And by associating with that devotee and hearing from that devotee, of course, and serving that devotee, one's material existence decreases. One may get an opportunity to associate, and then after that, with pure devotees. Associate with pure devotees. And by such association, because in the association devotees is a life behavior. But if we want to actually develop our attraction for Krishna, in other words, if we living entities, can be pure, completely purified, we need the association of pure devotees. Up to that point, we may become engaged in purifying activities, and we may be becoming purified. But to actually, the fruit of being purified is not just to be purified. The fruit of purification is to develop a love of God, which can be aroused by the process given by it. I'm not going to read the purport, other than to briefly mention those different kinds of pious activities, bhakti and mukta, or mukhi, bhakti and mukhi, and karma and mukhi, and so on like that. Different pious activities which are described in the scriptures as pious, but the results of different pious activities aren't there. They're not all the same. If we perform materially pious activities, we get a material return. We don't get a spiritual return. And if we perform activities which are meant for moksha, mukhi, or merging into the impersonal Brahman, simply, then that's the most one will get by such pious behaviors, such disciplinary activities, control of the mind, and so on, meditating on the impersonal Brahman, whatever they do. And one achieves that purpose, but one doesn't achieve the highest truth, either material or spiritual, but one doesn't receive the highest fruit, fruit of our lives, which is from bhakti and mukhi, devotional service, knowingly or unknowingly, a good fortune which accrues from engaging in devotional service. In the next verse, Lord Chaitanya quotes, Bhava bhavargo brahmato yadavavet janasya dharya kruta satma samagama satsangaya hitadaiva sadgato paravareshe trayajayate rati. You don't seem to have the Bengali there. You've got the English. Oh my, after this week I've been in a new Mayapur management meeting with our GBC this all day today from 9:30 to 6:30, almost 6 o'clock with a short break in between. A long meeting. Oh my Lord, oh infallible Supreme Person, when a person wandering throughout the universe becomes eligible for liberation from material existence, he gets an opportunity to associate with devotees. When he associates with devotees, his attraction for you is awakened. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the highest goal of the supreme devotees and the Lord of the universe. It's like Prabhupada went to the West. People got the opportunity, some, to associate with him, and their attraction towards Krishna was aroused. Otherwise, it would never be aroused. We can do whatever we like in this world. But just like fire, if we take a chunk of wood, you want the fire to burn, how's it going to burn? You can't just tell it to burn, it won't burn. It's not going to burn on its own, that's for sure. It's not going to burn when it's in contact necessarily with another log of wood, or with a car, or with a bottle, or anything else. How is it going to ignite? It ignites when it's in contact with fire. The fire, which is in the wood, dormant in the wood, comes out when it associates with that very fire itself. So when we associate with what we call fired up devotees, the fire in our own hearts can begin to blaze. That natural attraction towards devotional service and ultimately towards Krishna starts to blaze in our hearts. We start to become attracted. It may not be very strong at the beginning, but it's by the association of devotees that is evoked. That attraction towards Krishna can be awoken. Krishna, Lord Chaitanya goes on, text number 47, Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master. I'll read this thing going now. You've got it on the screen. Sorry about that. I didn't realize it on the screen. Krishna yadi kripakare kono bhagyavane Guru antaryami rupe shikaya apane. You can chant along with me wherever you are. These verses Prabhupada said are the Vedic. These are Vedic verses. They're transcendental, just like we chant Hare Krishna. Every word in the Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different than Krishna. Every word of Caitanya, Caritamrta, Bhagavad Gita. These are all transcendental words because they're spoken by the Lord himself in this case, or they're about the Supreme Personality. God is spoken by pure devotees. These are spoken by the Lord himself. These are like you have the Smritis and the memories gone. But different types of scriptures are there, and some spoken by the Lord, some spoken about him. So these are spoken by him. This is not ordinary words. So when the Lord says here, Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as Chaitya Guru. That's the Lord in the heart. Chaitya is the heart, the seat of consciousness. He's the Guru of that. Guru of one's inner lives. We may not know it, but he's guiding everyone. Krishna explains this in the Bhagavad Gita. In everyone's heart, guiding the wanderings of all living entities. Shruti. This is like words of the Shruti or Vedic literature. The spiritual master within. So he's the spiritual master within us, guiding us all. When he is kind to some fortunate conditioned soul, he personally gives one lessons to progress in devotional services. When he's kind, he gives us lessons, whether they're direct or indirect, but he gives us lessons to help us progress in spiritual life, instructing the person as the super soul within and the spiritual master without. Naivo payantya pachitam kavastavesha brahmayusa pikritam nidamudasmarantaha yantabhistanavitam ashubham vidurvan acharya chaitya vakushasagatim vanakti. O my Lord, transcendental poets and experts in spiritual science could not fully express their indebtedness to you, even if they were endowed with the prolonged lifetime of a Brahman. For you appear in two features, externally as the Acharya and internally as the Supersoul, to deliver the embodied living being by directing him how to come to you. Next verse. Sadhu Sange Krishna Bhakti Shraddhaya Dihai Bhakti Pala Premahaya Samsaraya Chaya. By associating with a devotee, one awakens his faith in devotional service to Krishna. Because of devotional service, one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, and thus one's material, conditional existence comes to an end. So it's one thing to end one's conditional existence, but that's not the idea. Without any other knowledge of existence, where do we end up? Nirvana? Or if we have the impersonal understanding, we may end up in Brahmajyoti with no relationship with anyone, with no interaction, with no variety, with no expression of love, just simply existing there in the plane of the Brahman, experiencing the stat feature of the living entity, this eternal spiritual nature, but not understanding the complete nature of the soul, certainly not living it, not having that knowledge. That chit aspect is missing. As what to speak of the Ananda aspect, which comes by loving exchanges with the Supreme Lord in loving devotional service. Devoid of that in the material world, we just have a perverted reflection of the Sat-Chit-Ananda constitutional nature of the soul in this material world, that we're constantly trying to enjoy unending pleasure wherever we can get hold of it. We're always aspiring for knowledge of something or another, and we're always hoping we never die. We're always trying to protect ourselves by various means because we're afraid of death, or we don't want it, or whatever. By associating with a devotee, next verse, Yadrichayamat kataro yata shadastu yakpuman na nirvino nati shakto bhakti yogo siddhadaha. Somehow or another, if one is attracted to talks about me and his faith in the injunctions I have set forth in the Bhagavad Gita, and if one is actually detached from material things and material existence, his dormant love for me will be awakened by devotional service. So, a few things in this verse: attraction to hearing about Krishna, talking about Krishna, and faith in Krishna's instructions. So this is generally awoken in the association of devotees, faith and the opportunity of hearing. Siddhanta Sangama Mavira Sangvidova Pantiudkarna. The Sainakata, that faith or that attraction to hearing the messages of Godhead awakens in the association of devotees. This is how it develops. And the next verse. And as that faith develops, and one follows faith in the instructions, we try to apply them in our lives, of course. And as our heart becomes cleansed by such activities, and naturally, Nityasiddha Krishna praying, Sagakavanai, Shravanadi Shrichiti Karyudaya. Love of Godhead awakens in the heart. It's already there, it's just covered over, but the process of Shravananadi, hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, and gradually awakening our faith in Krishna, cleanses the heart of all the coverings within the heart. And a natural affection for Krishna arises just like the sun. When the sun rises on the horizon, everything becomes enlightened. So the next verse, Mahakripa vina kona karni bhakti nai, Krishna bhakti durevaho samsara nahi chai. Unless one is favored by a pure devotee, he cannot attain the platform of devotional service. To say nothing of Krishna bhakti, one cannot even be relieved from the bondage of material existence. Nishtaya, Narottam Das says, Nishtaya Parichikeva, Charya Vaishnava Seva, Nishtaya Parichikeva. Unless one serves the pure devotee of the Lord, no one can be freed from this material world. It depends on the mercy of Krishna, which is bestowed upon one who pleases his devotees. And this is the process. Krishna's not pleased if we try to directly serve him. He's pleased when he sees us trying to serve his devotees. To say nothing of Krishna Bhakti, one cannot even be relieved of the bondage of material existence. Not possible without pleasing Krishna to become free of the bondage of material existence. And there's a purport, Srila Prabhupada, so many more verses we've got. I think we can read it. Yes, we can read it. There's a purport here. I'll just read the third paragraph, which you can read there. We're quoting from the Bhagavad Gita 9:13, but in the third paragraph, Prabhupada said, one has to associate with such a Mahatma who has accepted Krishna as the supreme source of the entire creation. Without being a Mahatma, one cannot understand Krishna's absolute position. A Mahatma is rare and transcendental, and he is a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. He's not just given a rubber stamp because he's popular in the social scenes, unless people consider him a Mahatma, or because he's a great footballer or cricket player, or musician or actor or actress or politician or whatever, that one gives a person the name Mahatma. It means great soul. And this material world is not a great soul, it's a great fool, because we're identifying with the body as the self. So it could be what we say, a Mahamurkha, great fool. It can be a great Murkha, Mahamurkha, and not a Mahatma. A Mahatma is a very rare soul. Very, very rare. Some Mahatma, Sadulabha, Krishna says, it's very rare in this world to meet such a Mahatma. Someone who's actually completely taken shelter of the divine energy of the Lord. One has to associate. Without being a Mahatma is rare. Foolish people consider Krishna a human being, and they consider Lord Krishna's pure devotee an ordinary human being also. Whatever one may be, one must take shelter of the lotus feet of a devotee, Mahatma, and treat him as the most exalted well-wisher of all human society. There are many people who worship ordinary persons as great. In India, we see it very vividly sometimes. People are worshipping. I know one temple I went to in Tamil Nadu once. They had a deity of one famous actor from Tamil Nadu. I don't know who it was, but they were worshipping, and they said he's an incarnation of Lord Ram. And they were worshipping this crazy, sensual personality and calling him. Sometimes they do this with the cricketers as if they're, demigods or God himself. Sometimes people do things in the West, they sometimes do it with musicians and things like this. And crazy things people do in this world because of ignorance, covered in ignorance. So ignorance has to be removed to understand what is a real Mahatma. One has to get the association of a Mahatma. Sevim Dwara Mahur Vimukte. If we want Ahur Vimukte, when Mahat means Mahatma, one has to serve the Mahatma. Mahat Sevim Dwaram, the gate, Dwara Mahur Vimukte, the liberation is open by service of the Mahatma. But Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam, when we serve those who are Sangi Sangam, those who are attached to this material world, attached to sex life, attached to their bodies and so on, then Tamo Dwaram, the gate to hell is opened. So most people don't know this. Even if they know it, they don't have any purity in heart to understand how it's applied. So the real essence is to associate with a Mahatma, and render service to them. By that method, Krishna is pleased, and thus the gates to the gates to the spiritual world are open. The gates to Vaikuntha are open by serving pure devotees of the Lord. A Mahatma is rare, transcendental. Whatever one may be, one must take shelter of the lotus feet of a devotee Mahatma. The most exalted well-wisher of all human society, we should take shelter of such a Mahatma and ask for his causeless mercy. Only by his benediction can one be relieved from attachment to a materialistic way of life. When one is thus relieved, he can engage in the Lord's transcendental loving service through the mercy of a Mahatma. And the next verse, a famous verse, this is a verse from the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The verse is the one you're seeing now, but ultimately originally it's from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's spoken by Jad Bharat to King Rahubana. Jad Bharat was, of course, the next form that King Bharat, after he fell down due to attachment with the deer, and the fact that Prabhupada actually describes it, interesting, it's related to this. Bharat Maharaj fall down from his position of you could say the stepway or on the gateway of bhava, practically speaking, of loving ecstasy, completely attached to his service. But he was almost on the level of bhava. Sometimes said he was experiencing ecstatic symptoms. He fell down from that position by Krishna's arrangement ultimately, but he taught a lesson within this, and Prabhupada explains the lesson why Jad Bharat fell down, King Bharat at that time, why he fell down from his position was because, and Prabhupada said, because when he was faced with this dilemma as to what to do about this deer, he did not consult with the spiritual master. He said, thus he fell down. He acted independently and fell down. So the real fall down was not the fall down with the deer, but the fact that he did not consult, Prabhupada said. Lord Caitanya taught this when he was initiated by Ishwara Puri, and he was He knew what was going on, but in one sense, he was going mad. People didn't know what was happening. He's gone crazy. He's just roaring, Krishna, Krishna, where are you, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. People thought he'd gone mad. And he asked his spiritual master, what is this? You've given me this mantra and I'm going crazy? Lord Chaitanya said, no, this is a symptom. Ishwar said, it is a symptom of love of God. It's not going crazy. Anyway, Lord Chaitanya was just teaching that we should check with our spiritual master the idea of the Maha. So Lord Jadbarat said, excuse me, Ruhuganaitat tapasanayati nache jayani vapanad vihadva nachandasanaiva jalagni surya vinat paravadyo vishekam. Very, very good. O King Rahugana, without taking upon one's head the dust from the lotus feet of a pure devotee, a Maharaja or Mahatma, one cannot attain devotional service. Devotional service is not possible to attain simply by undergoing severe austerities and penances, or by gorgeously worshipping the deity, or by strictly following the rules and regulations of the sannyas or grihastha order, nor by studying the Vedas, submerging oneself in water, or exposing oneself to fire or scorching sunlight. None of these things will achieve pure devotional service. So only when we take the dust from the lotus feet of a pure devotee on one's head. The prayer book just describes a little bit of that, we already said. Now there's another verse very similar to that one in the 7th canto of Bhagavatam. Naishamatistavadarukkramangrim Vishat Janarta Pagamo Yadaka Mahiyasam Paravajobhishekam Niskinchananam Navinitaya. And this is spoken by Prahlad Maharaj. Unless human society accepts the dust, or maybe it's narrowed, I don't know. Unless human society accepts the dust of the lotus feet of great Mahatmas, devotees who have nothing to do with material possessions, mankind cannot turn its attention to the lotus feet of Krishna. Those lotus feet vanquish all the unwanted, miserable conditions of material life. Those lotus feet of Krishna is not just a question of some kind of imagination of some physical form of the Lord's lotus feet. What it means literally is to take shelter, to become humble, and to hear the instructions of the Lord and making them one with one's heart. In other words, dedicating one's life and soul to the instructions of the Lord coming through the spiritual master. That's the process. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes this in his purport to the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, text number 41. How important it is that we make those instructions of the spiritual master our life and soul. That is the practical understanding of taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. And you could say that the attitudinal process is developing the position of an attitude of humble submission to the will of the Lord, completely humble submission to the will of the Lord. And the devotee worships those lotus feet of the Lord. He's taking shelter. Worship of the lotus feet of the Lord, of course, is considered to be the way of approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the feet up. So we take those instructions and gradually becoming purified, and gradually it's said that one can proceed up the beautiful form of the Lord to the smiling face of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam is like that. That's why we start in the beginning of the Bhagavatam with the 1st and 2nd canto, which we relate to the souls of the Lord's lotus feet, and then gradually move up. This verse is in the 7th. Whoever takes to these, this verse was spoken by Prahlad Maharaj to his father, Hiranyakashipu, and Narada also spoke it when he was giving instructions to Maharaj Yudhishthira. And Prahlad Maharaj informed his father of the 9 basic processes of Bhakti Yoga. Whoever takes to these processes is to be considered a highly learned scholar. Hiranyakashipu, however, did not like his son to talk about devotional service. Therefore, he immediately called his teacher Sandamarka, The teacher explained that he did not teach devotional service to Prahlad, but that the boy was naturally inclined that way. That time Hiranyakashipu became very angry and asked Prahlad why he had become a Vaishnava. In answer to this question, Prahlad Maharaj recited this verse to the effect that one cannot become the Lord's devotee without receiving the mercy and blessings of another devotee. Pretty bold response to his father, who was really irate. Next verse. Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastri Kai Lava Matra Sadhu Sange Sarva Siddhi Hai. This is definitely a very famous verse here in the Caitanya Charitamrta. The verdict of all revealed scripture is that by even a moment's association with a pure devotee, one can attain all success. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking this statement, the verdict of all revealed scriptures, even a moment, lava matra is a moment, it's a fraction of a second, association with the pure devotee of the Lord, one can attain all success. Well, what it means, okay, first of all, association with the pure devotee. There's always a degree of quality in one's association. That's a subject matter in itself, in terms of our submissive approach, in terms of our attentiveness, etc., our faith, etc., determine our particular quality of our association. And then on top of that, the long term, you could say, understanding of this is that seed of devotional service, Brahmanda Brahmite Kaum, Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. Elsewhere in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in this section, Lord Chaitanya quotes this verse, that after wandering through many lifetimes in this material world, up and down the samsara cycle, by the mercy of Krishna, one gets the opportunity to associate with a pure devotee, and then one's able to receive the seed, the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of devotional service in one's heart. So although it's there, it's not manifested. So in the association of pure devotees of the Lord, that potential for loving Krishna manifests, it's awoken. It may only be the very beginning. It's like if we're ever growing anything in our garden, you can buy a packet of seeds from the marketplace, but you may place them in the soil. But if not, you won't see the result immediately. It takes time, it takes watering, it takes so many things. But that's the beginning of the growth. Without the seed, nothing will grow. So in the association of pure devotees of the Lord, the seed, in the sense of, we can say comparatively speaking, the seed is planted in the heart, or we can say the seed manifests in the heart. And then it may take time, and that is a very personal thing. How much time? That depends. Depends on the individual soul and how much mercy he takes or they take. It may take lifetimes. It could be very quickly. It could be on the moment. Perhaps because of previous association or whatever. It could be right on the spur of the moment. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said when he first came in contact with the pure Caitanya Charitamrta, immediately he said, I experienced symptoms of anurag, or at least very shortly. It wasn't immediate according to the biography, but almost immediately he experienced symptoms of anurag, or ecstatic symptoms, which manifest when one realizes one's actual constitutional position in relation with Krishna. One may experience symptoms of ecstasy manifest in the living entity who has that realization, anuraga. So it can happen immediately, but it usually takes time. But it's the beginning of the end, you could say. The poison, as Prabhupada sometimes say, has already been injected. So it's just a matter of time before the effect is experienced. The next verse, and the last verse we're going to read today, Tulayamalavena pina svargam napunarbhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya martyanam kimuta shishaha. The value of a moment's association with a devotee of the Lord cannot even be compared to the attainment of heavenly planets or liberation from matter. And what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which is for those who are meant for death. This is a beautiful verse here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's see. Yes. Anyway, we'll come on to the purport in a minute. The value of a moment's association with a devotee of the Lord cannot even be compared to the attainment of heavenly planets or liberation from matter, what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which is for those who are meant for death. There is no comparison, and there's so many Shastic quotes in this. If you want to read quite a few, you can go to the Nectar of Devotion, how devotional service surpasses liberation. There are many quotes in that section of Nectar of Devotion on the exalted position of devotional service and its comparative, let's say, effects in relationship with other processes which lead to other results. And there's no comparison. It's just like a drop of water in the desert or a tiny shallow puddle of water or whatever, insignificant. And we've heard it before, but Radhanath Maharaj tells that pastime of his old friend before he became a devotee of Prabhupada in ISKCON. And he had a friend in Vrindavan named Ganesham, who was previously had been a prince from a kingdom in Rajasthan. And but when the king and his son, the prince Ganesham, had come to Vrindavan, Ganesham didn't want to leave Vrindavan. He wanted to stay there for his whole life, and he would not leave. And when his father, the king, and the queen came there, and they said, "Look, if you don't come back home, you're going to lose everything. We're going to take you off you're not going to become the next. You are the heir to the kingdom. You're going to be, we're going to take you off. You won't be the heir anymore. You're one of the other relatives, maybe brother or something. But you will have nothing, zero. You're going to live here like a beggar for the rest of your life. Come on, wake up, son. Wake up, you're crazy. You could become, filthy rich. You just have to stay with us, become rich." Well, Ganesham wasn't impressed. And he said, "What do I care for all the riches of this world?" He picked up one grain of dust from Vrindavan and said, "This grain of dust is more valuable than all the material, valuable, whatever in the universe. Everything is more valuable than the whole universe." And he was convinced that, that little drop of Vrindavan, that little tiny speck of devotional service, or that speck of dust in Vrindavan, is far more valuable than everything we can get in this material. And that's the point. Until we realize this, we have to remain in this material world of birth and death, basically speaking. Wandering around. We have to be completely free of this idea that I can enjoy this, I can control this world, I can enjoy this world, this is my world, I like this world, whatever it is, Unless one has freedom, all affection towards trying to, that's what Maya means, this mentality of seeing ourselves in relationship with the material world, seeing the material world in relationship with us as an object of our pleasure. So one who self-realized sees, no, there is no real pleasure in this mystery. There's no real pleasure in this material world. This material is a place, temporary place full of suffering, full of birth and death. Krishna says, on the topmost planet, we can put the screen back on now, I think, Vasika. Put the screen back on. I think we finished the chapter, the reading here. How Krishna describes, right from the topmost planet down to the lowest planet in this world, all are places of repeated birth and death. Wherever we go, fear is there, suffering, anxiety, insecurity, so many things are there. Pains of various kinds, threefold miseries, birth, death, disease, and old age. And that's the nature of this world. That's what is inside. When you read the ingredients of a product, you like to read the ingredients, especially if you're a vegetarian, to make sure there's nothing non-vegetarian inside of it. And you should read what the ingredients of this material wood are. Okay, here you go. Who wants it? Birth, death, disease, and old age. Misery is caused by other living entities. Misery is caused by the body and mind. Misery is caused by material nature, which from concomitant anxiety, stress, pain, frustration, lamentation, fear, etc., etc. Maybe we wouldn't buy into it if we read the ingredients a little bit more. Lord Buddha also said, what is this material body? Even a beautiful lady, you take the skin off, what's left? Horror. It looks horrific, absolutely horrific. Just take off that fine line of skin, and the body is horrible underneath, absolutely repulsive. It's horrible, ghastly. It's ghastly. It's just Maya, that skin deep. And skin is not very deep, it's extremely thin. That so-called beauty becomes not at all beautiful. No matter who we are, it's ghastly. But we don't realize we're betwixt by Maya, which is sometimes described as a witch-like effect, bewildered by her potency. And we're starting to think, is this beautiful? This is just a reflection. It's not the reality. So the association of Mahatma helps to open our eyes so we start seeing things for what it is. And also, not just that, and then we become horrified and want to reject it. No, but in the association of a genuine devotee Mahatma, a Vaishnava, then one's dormant love for Krishna, for the reality, starts to awaken in our hearts. So this is the mercy of this is the meaning of Vaishnava initiation. Both these things, delivering us from this illusion and awakening our reality within us. This is initiation, the process of initiation is to give that knowledge which will help to open our eyes so we can see things properly. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, I'm going to finish there. Any questions? Hare Krishna, everyone. I think there may be one. I don't know. On chat. Oh, well, Haribol Parampir from Punjabi Bagh. Jai, you're lucky you're in the Holy Land. The Holy Land in Delhi. Delhi is a holy land. Krishna spent much time in Delhi, Indraprastha, Hastinapura, the Pandavas, and so many devotees there. So let's read what we got here. I request you can please enlighten how to actually associate in a proper way, associate with devotees, equal, senior, and junior. Well, this is a good question, very important question. I don't know how much time we'll have to go into too much detail on this. This is described, generally speaking, in the Nectar of Instruction by Rupa Goswami, how we associate with seniors by hearing from them, submissively hearing from them. Of course, we have to have a little common sense to know who is a senior and what their situation is. Just because they've been initiated 50 years by a guru, but they're all engaged in all kinds of nonsense, that's something else. We have to hear from somebody who's actually, following the process of devotional service, somebody who's in line with one's particular parampara, etc. We may respect everyone. I would say we even respect Mayavadi sannyasis, but we don't hear from them. We don't associate with them by hearing. We respect them. So it's not just a matter of respecting the seniors. It's a matter of, let's see. Even Kapila Dev was a little small boy, but he was instructing his elderly mother in the science of devotional service. Other Prahlad Maharaj was also a small boy. So it's not a question of the age, it's a question of the spiritual position, elevated spiritually. So we hear from those who are more elevated spiritually in their line, and then we serve them. This is the process, Tadvidi Pranipatini Pariprashning Seva. Inquire submissively, hearing and rendering service. So that's how it is. And we never criticize such personalities, even in our dreams, if we can, because who are we to criticize when we're covered ourselves? We don't see the real Mahatma, but by associating with the real Mahatmas, then we become purified and we serve them. Danasya Vasudeva Taruchi. One's heart, by the grace of Krishna, becomes cleansed by rendering service. One develops a genuine taste to hear the message of Godhead. So we render service, inquire, and hear submissively. And those who are on a similar level of devotional service, now everyone's on a different level, but kind of, as I said, there's generalizations. Each situation is different. So we offer our obeisances to those who are on a similar level also. Those who are on an advanced level, we take shelter of them, we surrender to them. Offer our obeisance to them too. Those who are on the same level, we share devotional service, we encourage each other, we assist each other in our devotional service, we offer obeisances to each other, etc. Those who are less mature in devotional service, less evolved in devotional service, we serve everyone. On every level we serve. Service is the common denominator throughout all relationships. It's always in the mood of service. So we serve them by encouraging them to come forward in devotional service. We serve them by encouraging them, guiding them, etc. We may also literally serve them as Prabhupada did. in New York with the first initiation. He cooked the feast, served the feast, and cleaned up after the feast. So he was even literally serving, not just giving them direction on the path of devotion, but he was actually serving them externally as well as internally, you could say. So whatever it is, but that mood of service is always there. But generally, those who are junior, those who are less mature, taking the same, let's say, principle the other way from their point of view, they're going to want to render service to those who are more advanced. They're going to want to hear from those who are more advanced. The devotee should always be like that, compassionate. There's always somebody who knows less than what we've received, and it is our good fortune if we can pass it on to them. We can share that. So we try to preach, guide, teach, whatever you want to call it, those who are less mature by our words and by our example. Words alone are not. Example should also be. That's just a generalization, and the details are going to be vary from person to person, circumstance to circumstance, but the generalization is something like that. Okay. Here's something from, where are we? And where are we? In Malaysia or something. Hare Krishna. Your initiation pastime with Shiva Prabhupada. I think you know all about it. It's quite an interesting experience also. It's quite, every initiation has its unique feature, especially to those receiving initiation. There's always some story there, something which imposes what we say a samskara, an impression on our heart, which brings us back to that stage of making that commitment, of making that connection, of that giving our false ego up, humbly taking shelter, whatever it is. There's always something there which we can refer to. I'm sure there is. I mean, how can I speak for myself and others who've told me that they also had some unique thing which took place at their initiations. We were hearing recently in New Mayapur about different devotees at their initiations, some very unusual, very extraordinary experiences of initiation. We had several Prabhupada disciples with us some months ago. I think it was on Bharam festival time. We were talking about the connection with Srila Prabhupada, their first meeting, initiation, so on. So I'll just briefly tell it was in 1972 in July, Srila Prabhupada had come to London for the Rath Yatra festival primarily, and of course initiations were also on the menu. And there were about, from England anyway, there were about a dozen of us being recommended for first initiation, a handful for second. And there were about a dozen others from around Europe, from Holland, I think, Sweden, maybe France, I don't think so. But Holland, Sweden, Germany at least had also come over. Maybe the numbers are not exactly right, but something like that. We're also there, and the idea was that we would get initiated on Trafalgar Square, which is a big square in the centre of London, at the end of the Rath Yatra. So at the end of the Rath Yatra, we all had to gather on there's this called stone plinth. It's like a stone platform underneath this great Nelson's column. We all had to sit there. The fire yogi was going to be right there under the column, and Prabhupada was sat on his Vyasa, which had been taken down to the square. And there were thousands, 10,000 people or something in the square watching the whole event, completely unaware of what on earth is going on here on Trafalgar Square, the first time in history that such a thing had ever happened. It happened twice, 72 and 73. So it's quite a startling event. And Prabhupada, of course, we started off by doing some kind of ashram. I think we did ashram, I can't remember. It was very bare in those days. We may not even done ashram, there's quite a lot of us, but I can't remember. So then after that, Prabhupada then gave a lecture. He gave the lecture, and I guess it's recorded. I can't remember what it was about. Obviously something to do with initiation or surrendering to devotional service or something, I guess. And then at the end of that, then Prabhupada's secretary, you could say, Pradyumna Prabhu, Panditji, was calling us all up to receive her names, beads, and so on. So he was calling us in groups of 3. There was probably about 24, maybe a little bit round about that, coming up for first initiation in all. So he was calling us up in groups of 3 to speed it up a little bit. So my name got called out in the first group, and we went up for initiation. I don't know who else. 3 of us went up. And Prabhupada saw that we had no neck beads on. Nobody had yet put the neck beads on, been, overlooked. So he said, you have to go back. You can't take initiation without neck beads. So we went back and sat down again. Someone came and started putting neck beads on everybody. We didn't, well, as far as I remember, we didn't even wear neck beads before initiation. In those days, we didn't have very much facility. But anyway, he said, we have to put neck beads on. So we had the neck beads put on. Then Pradyumna again started calling the names up. This time the order was different. I wasn't in the first batch, second batch, third batch. I wasn't in the fourth, fifth, sixth, or eighth, seventh, or eighth. My name was not called out at all, which is, for me, it was like, I guess my head was spinning a little bit, wondering what on earth is happening. And then the fire sacrifice began, and I had no way I was going to speak up in front of thousands and thousands of people, and 30 devotees sat around me, and with dozens of others around also, and Prabhupada there with a fire there, and sannyasis and this thing and that thing going on. I was just a bit sort of stunned, I suppose you could say. I was like lost for words. So then we started the fire yagya. Pradyumna started the fire yagya, and we sat there throwing grains in, and everything happened, like, just like that. It was like a dream in some ways. I didn't know what was going on. I felt like, should I just bury my head in the stone? It's very hard to bury a head in stone. I could have smashed my head against the stone, but that wouldn't have looked very good. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going on. I was thinking, oh my gosh, Krishna. You cannot cheat Krishna. We may be able to cheat others, but you can't cheat Krishna. You can't cheat Prabhupada either. So, Krishna knows you are not fit for initiation, full stop. I just drew the line. I said, you're not fit for initiation, full stop. And I just thought, well, I was too puffed up and shy and whatever else emotion I had to just say, okay, I understand, and just get down from the stage and just join the audience or something. I was too proud for that. So I sat there throughout the whole yagya. And at the end of the yagya, everyone probably got up to leave. And everyone was all excited, Those were coming up saying, Prabhu, what's your new name? Mataji, what's your new name? Whatever they called the ladies in those days. Everyone was like excited, A temple president, his name was Janananda in those days. Wonderful devotee from England, one of the first devotees in the UK. He was a TP, and he came up to me and said, so, Jeff, what's your new name? What's your new name? And I said, Jeff. No, I know, but what's your new name? I said, don't have one. And he said, what? You're supposed to have been initiated. He said, didn't you get initiated? He said, I don't know what happened. I simply don't know. I didn't get beads. I didn't get caught up. I don't know what happened. And he was like, well, this is strange. I gave the beads to Pradyumna for Prabhupada to chant on. And so then Pradyumna went over to, quickly, Prabhupada was just, Dhananjaya rather, went quickly over to Pradyumna. They were just getting in the car to leave. And Prabhupada was already in the car, and Pradyumna was just getting in, just closing the door for Prabhupada. And Dhananjaya spoke to him and said something. I don't know, I wasn't there. I could just see from a few meters away. This boy was supposed to be initiated. What happened? He said something like that. And Pradyumna said, no, all the beads have been given out. There's no more initiates. They all got their beads. He said, well, what happened to this boy? And Pradyumna said, see, he had a bag. He had like a funny kind of shoulder cloth bag. He said, no, there's no beads left in my bag. They're all gone. And he put his hands in the bag. This part I know, he told me. And he put his hand in his bag. And when I saw it, boom, suddenly, he said, out came one set of beads. There it was. So what to do? And then they discussed, and Pradyumna told Dhananjaya, tell the boy to come back to Bari Place, which is where the temple is right now. So I had to leave Trafalgar Square. And Prabhupada then drove back to Bari Place in the car. And I had to run, because the beads were still with Pradyumna, I had to run back to Bari Place. I didn't have to, but I did. I ran back. I was in great anticipation. What is now going to happen? I didn't know what was going to happen. I was actually thinking, no, okay, just take the sauce. Prabhupada's going to tell you to get out of this movement, don't come back. You're not warranting to be in this movement. So I went back to the temple, waited there outside Prabhupada's room. There was hardly anyone there. There's one or two devotees. Everyone was still at Trafalgar Square. The festival was going on. Everyone else stayed back for Kirtan. There was probably a drama, maybe another talk. I don't know what they did. I wasn't there to see. But the festival went on there, so I waited quite a while outside Prabhupada's room. And eventually Pradyumna came out. Maybe he knew I was there or not, I can't remember, but he came out at a certain point and said, oh, okay. And then he went after a little while later. He said, okay, you can go in now. And I thought, oh my God, I was so nervous going in alone into Prabhupada's room. Nobody, actually, even Pradyumna didn't come. I thought, at least, because I had a good relationship with Pradyumna, we somehow always got along well with each other. I just known him a few days, but immediately you could connect, really connected well. And so on my own, oh no, I was so nervous. I went in, Prabhupada sat behind his desk, and I think he had his glasses on, I can't remember, but I think he did. And he was doing some reading, studies, and writing, I don't know, something was on his table, some book. And he was sat there and he looked up, I immediately bowed down before Prabhupada. And I sat down, and Prabhupada looked at me. He could probably see I was a bag of nerves. And he looked at me and he sort of didn't say much. He just said, so, what are the 4 regulated principles? And I managed to get it out somehow or another. How many rounds? Usual thing. Just said the same, usual thing. Then he took the beads and handed them in his own hand to me and said, your name is Janananda Das. And he said the meaning. He told me what it meant. And then I bowed down again. And he said, put the beads on the table before you bow down. Both hands on the floor, please. So I did. I put the beads on his table and bowed down. And then I got up again. And I was just about, by this time I was just like, the dream had become sort of a continuation in a sense of a dream, but it was a reality. But I then thought, what am I going to do? I guess I have to leave now. I didn't know what to say anything. I was looking at me, and then he said, so, and then he opened his little tiffin on his table, and he took out a big sweet bowl. He said, here, take this sweet bowl. And he gave me a big sweet bowl. And I bowed down again with the sweet bowl in my hand. And Prabhupada said, put the sweet bowl on the table first. Bow down with both hands. I bowed down with both hands. And got up and took the sweet bowl and the beads. And then I exited the room. I couldn't think of anything to say other than answer a couple of questions Prabhupada asked. Pay my obeisances. But a little special thing, a remembrance of an unusual initiation. I did the yoga first and got the beads later on in an unusual way, you could say. And not there were many people got them like similar in Prabhupada's room alone, I'm sure, but it was kind of unusual in this particular circumstance. It's something that sticks in the heart, a little bit of a kind of memory like that. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. Please share. We have celebrated a very, very nice Rath Yatra festival. My goodness, you're lucky, lad. Where have you celebrated? Here in London? And in Trafalgar Square itself? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I thought it was Ananda Vrindavan talking that we've just celebrated a very nice Rath Yatra in London. I didn't know about that. And in Trafalgar Square itself, I initiated nearly 30 new devotees with Fire Yoga before 25,000 persons, mostly Englishmen. All in all, it was the best Rath Yatra we have seen to date. Oh, there you go. Letter to Karanda. Thank you very much, Ananda Vrindavan. Prabhupada maybe, it may have been 25,000 persons. I guess it depends how you look at it. I mean, people on the street also celebrated. People coming in and out of the square celebrated. If you count everyone who saw the festival, it's probably more than 25,000. So he said 30. I was right. About 30 devotees there taking initiation. Best Rath Yatra we have seen today. Isn't that wonderful? Prabhupada wrote that letter in 1972 to Karanda, the GBC for Los Angeles. Fabulous. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. Thank you, Ananda Vrindavan. Yes, Trafalgar Square. So I'm not completely, an illusion. I got the right place, more or less the right number, maybe a few less people than Prabhupada said. We had a fire yoga right there. And mostly they were Englishmen in those days. Now you don't find so many Englishmen in the Rath Yatras. Most of the Rath Yatras around the world, not all by any means, but there's mostly Indian devotees there now. Even in San Francisco, I was watching last year the video, or maybe the year before, I can't remember which one, but one of them, of the 50th anniversary. It's been a few years now, 67. So it had been in 2017, I was watching it. The Rath Yatra in San Francisco, 2017, and I watched then the 60, maybe it wasn't 67, but one of the early Rath Yatras in San Francisco, and the first one, or the recent one, so to speak, was over 90% Indian devotees. And the other one I watched, I couldn't see an Indian amongst the crowd. About maybe 1968 or 69 or so, could hardly see an Indian person amongst the crowd. You could say the logistics have changed quite a bit. Well, there's nothing. Both are good. Now we should have both. It's not one or the other. Both should be there. Unlimited devotees in Indian bodies and unlimited devotees in non-Indian bodies. Both should be there. That's Prabhupada's mission. There's no question of discrimination. One's better or worse, or one should be or one shouldn't be. Every living entity is, it's the whole purpose of Rath Yatra is to bring everyone into the Rath Yatra, to bring everyone to get that initial connection with Krishna at least once in this lifetime, at least that much, at least once, to get the opportunity to chant and to have the good fortune of seeing Lord Jagannath from the Radhika. Thank you very much, Ananda Vrindavan. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada. So, we actually had our first kids' Rath Yatra in Netherlands last Sunday. Wonderful, congratulations. The kids' Rath Yatra are also fabulous. They're really, truly fabulous. Prabhupada started this going when he was a kid, 7 years old. He was crying and begging his dad, I want a Rath Yatra car, I want a Rath. It was so deep in Prabhupada's blood, this Rath Yatra. It was such important. He had the first Rath Yatra in London before they even had a temple. They had no temple. And they had a Rath Yatra in London before they even had in 68 the first Rath Yatra. Even before they had a temple. 69, I mean, the first Rath Yatra in London. They arrived in 68. The next year in 69, they had their first Rath Yatra. They had no temple at that time. They were just staying here and there. And in San Francisco, they only just opened the temple there. It was just a side street, like a store on the side of the road there. The Prabhupada had Rath Yatra festival, first major festival. Such a most important festival in Rath Yatra. Prabhupada said, we have Rath Yatra in every town, city of the world, along with mass book distribution, the whole world will be conquered. So it's a very important festival, Rath Yatra. Extremely important, most important festival of the year. Most important. Lord Caitanya is, practically speaking, the essence of his manifest pastimes in this world is centered around Rath Yatra festival, of Radharani wanting Krishna to come back to Vrindavan. Why? This is the mood of separation, the essential mood of separation of the Brijbasis of Radharani, etc. is manifested, or let's say, is performed in the activity of Rath Yatra, fulfilling the desire of Radharani and the residents of Vrindavan, to bring Krishna back to Vrindavan. So please try to have Rath Yatra, big, small, in, out, wherever you can, all over the world, whenever we can. We don't know the future, nobody can say, but as much as we can, we want to have Rath Yatra everywhere. This year there's been very few Rath Yatras in the summer in the north. No, they have very few. Nothing compared to normal, but some have gone on. A few in Europe have gone on, maybe a few here and there. But not so many. And hopefully next year we'll be able to double and redouble the Rath Yatra festivals. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, thank you everybody so much. We're having 2 Zoom classes this weekend if you want to join us. Janananda will be giving out the, no, not this weekend. We're having one this weekend, not 2. The weekend after we're having 2. This weekend, only Saturday. Weekend after we have 2. So thank you all so very much. We'll have a little kirtan and sign off. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Rasika. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Go Premanande! Srila Prabhupada ki jai! Haribo! Haribo, everyone! Mute, unmute. Haribo!
Haribo, Hare Krishna,
Hare
Gurudev.
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare Jai.
Go Premanande!
Hare
Hare Krishna! Haribo!
Jai Shri Gurudev ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai!
Jai.